All right, Offies, as promised, we are going to be doing the 2023 Term 1 practical paper of grade 12. I hope that you all did it at home and that you are using this video not as a form of study, but as a form of revision. That's going to be very, very important. So if you haven't done this yet, I would highly recommend that you pause this video, that you quickly go and do the question paper. It's not going to take you more than an hour or an hour and a half. And then once you are done, you can always come back and you can have a look at the question paper. All right. That being said, let's dive right in. So the first thing we're going to be looking at today is we're going to be looking at our actual question paper. And I've got it here for us on the screen. And for the question paper, we are going to be looking at the questions. There's only one question, question one, and it's all about object orientation. So we might as well dive right into that. All right, so I've got the question paper open in front of me. Let's have a quick read. It says the result of a candidate who auditions for the Reach for the Stars competition must be captured to determine whether the candidate qualifies to take part in the competition or not. On registration, the candidate had to submit a recording of an item that he or she wants to perform. The recorded performance was evaluated by a panel and a pre-score out of 20 was awarded. Do the following. Open the incomplete program in the question 1 folder. Open the incomplete object class in the audition_u.bas file. Enter your name and surname as a comment in the first line of the question 1_u.bas file. Compile and execute the program. The program has limited functionality currently. Then an example of the graphical user interface is given, and it says complete code as specified in question 1.1 and 1.2. Now, the first part here is always going to be question 1. And question 1 usually in our code is all in our test papers is always going to be about my class. So whenever you see question 1.1, you're going to see that this question is all about the class. Now, there are some things that we need to take cognizance of, that we need to be aware of whenever we work with the class. Now, one of the first things we need to know whenever we're working with a class is that in the class, we have no GUI components. That's very important. So the class does not make use of any GUI components. What will you find in your class? You are going to find stuff like attributes, which act kind of the same way as global variables do. You are going to find methods. And there are three main types of methods that you're going to find. The first is called a constructor. You're going to find a procedure. And you're definitely going to also find some functions. Now we'll get to the difference between each one of these in just a bit. But for now, let's just realize that question 1.1, whenever we see that we're busy with the class, we're going to immediately realize that there is no GUI component and that the type of things that I can expect in my class are attributes and methods. Now, having that background knowledge, let's go back to the question paper and see what they gave us. Over here it says, the incomplete object class tAudition provided contains the following. Now, the first thing I need to take cognizance of or be aware of is this word over here, tAudition. tAudition is going to be my class type. In other words, it is a word that I'm going to tell the computer to know in order to describe my class. What type of class is this? Well, this is a tAudition type of class. It's kind of like just telling the computer what type this class is going to be and giving it a name, even though we don't really know what it's all about yet. Now it says declarations for 5 attributes that define the audition object. So this object class has 5 attributes. Now, these attributes over here, they kind of function more or less like global, private variables. Now, let's take a moment and just think about what that means. Global means that all of the procedures and functions have access to these attributes. Your constructor will have access to these attributes, your procedures will have access to this attribute, and your functions will also have access to these attributes. The fact that it is private simply means that only this class can see the attributes. If somebody else, like your GUI for example, would like to make use of these variables, they would need to access these variables via a mutator or an assessor method, which we'll get into a little bit later. But for now, just remember that these attributes act like global private variables. In other words, they can be used anywhere and they can only be seen within the class. The next section says the attributes for this addition object have been declared as follows. So over here, you will see your attributes, and the attributes will have this prefix f at the beginning. The prefix f simply indicates to us by convention that these variables are attributes. In other words, they function as global private variables. Now let's see. The name attribute describes the name of the candidate. The category attribute describes the category of the performance. The pre-score attribute scores awarded to the pre-recorded performance. The F-votes attribute is the number of judges who voted for the candidate to participate in the competition. And F-final score is the final score for the addition. Now, having all this information, let's hop over to our questions. Complete code for the code in the object class as described in question 1.1.1 to 1.1.5. Now, before we head into this part, I really want to give you 3 basic rules that we should follow whenever answering these questions. The first rule is going to be very simple. It's going to simply ask, what kind of method? So when reading these questions, you're going to read each of the questions twice. It is important that we also understand what kind of method we should create. So therefore, we're going to read it a second time and ask ourselves these questions. First question being, what kind of method are we working with? The second, just turn on my pen there. The second question we're going to ask ourselves is, what are the parameters? Now, parameters are actually just little placeholders for values that we don't have yet, but we'll get them somewhat later. Now, this is where a lot of students get confused. Usually, we think that parameters don't exist, and we actually have to go about and look for these parameters ourselves. We have to kind of find these values, when in reality, we don't have to find any value. All the values that we need, we can simply create. Let me just fix what I've done here. And then just add that W back there. So our first thing is going to ask, what are the methods that I'm going to use? The second one is going to say, are there any parameters? Like I said, parameters refer to those things that I need in order to solve this question or this problem, but I don't have yet. It's a placeholder for information that I'll get somewhat later. It's kind of like saying, hey, let me just fix the problem right now. How I'm going to get the materials to fix this problem, I'll sort that out a little bit later. All right, and then finally, we've got the third question. Now, the third question simply asks, what must I return? So I'm just going to write return here. And in the case of a procedure, what you are going to return is simply nothing. right? So that question is answered easily. As well as with the constructor method, nothing is returned. But in case it is a function that we need to create, we are going to ask ourselves, what do we need to return? So these are the three things that we need to ask ourselves before we start trying to code the question. What kind of method am I going to use? What parameters am I going to need? And what is my return value going to be? Now, with that in mind, let's go to our first question. So our first question here says, write code for a constructor method to receive the candidate's name, category of performance, and pre-score as parameter values. Assign these values to the respective attributes. Set the number of votes and the final score to 0. All right, let's ask our questions. Question 1 in red, we're going to ask, what kind of method is this? Well, the first question is always almost the most simple of all. This is a constructor method. So I can just kind of make a little note for myself there. This is a constructor method. Question number 2 is going to ask, okay, if this is a constructor method, what parameters am I going to use? Let's see. Parameters refer to the things that we will receive later on. Now, usually there's this little keyword over here that helps us with this information. But sometimes we kind of have to do this by making our own deductions. Now, let's see. In this case, they gave us the word. It will receive, let's see what parameters we've got. The candidate's name, that's one thing. So I'll have to provide a parameter for that candidate's name. The category of performance, that is a second thing. Right? And the third thing here is the pre-score as parameter values. Oh, so they even told us these were your parameters. This was nice of them. So let's add this last one here, the pre-score, as our third parameter here. Now, it says assign these values to their respective attributes. And now there's a little bit extra in this one, because now it says that the number of votes and the final score must be set to 0. But because this is not one of our questions, I'm not even going to mark it right now, and we'll deal with it when we answer the question. Let's ask our third question. Is there going to be a return type? Remember, only functions have return types. So if we indicated that it was a constructor method or we indicated that it was a procedure, we do not need to find a return value. So now having all of that ready and done, let's head over to our coding and we're going to see if we can create our constructor method. So I'm going to just do this. There we go. And you can see here on my screen, I'll zoom in a bit, but there we are going to be in our class and we're going to be busy with our constructor method. All right, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit like that and hopefully everybody can see. Now, one of the first things that we need to understand is that our methods are always declared beneath the public keyword and above this end that happens to be just above implementation. Sometimes var can live here in between, but don't be frustrated by that. Just make sure that you always put your methods here in the public section. Public simply means that it can be accessed from outside of the class, which is what we want to do. So it makes sense for us to put it there. All right, let's create our constructor method. To create the constructor method, it's very simple. First, we have to type in the word constructor. And if you did it correctly, it would turn blue, so I can see that I've made a spelling error. And there, where I spell it correctly, it turns blue. Great. Now I can head over to the next step. They didn't tell me to provide a name for this constructor, so I'll use the default constructor name, which is create. Create's kind of like the standard way that we use in coding. All right. Now time for us to fill in our parameters. Parameters appear in brackets right after the name of the method. In here, we can now type in the values. Now, the first one was the candidate's name. Now, a little bit of a tip. If you look at your attributes up here, they are going to correspond with some of the parameters that we put in here. So I can see that fname is going to be a string variable, and probably, because that's one makes the most sense, my candidate's name is going to go in there. So it makes sense to make fname, to make my parameter something like sname, and declare this parameter as a string. The next one says category of performance. Now, you'll see that f category again here at the top is again a string. So I'll just add this with a comma this time and say s category. Great. Finally, the pre-score must also be awarded. And I can see the pre-score here is an integer. So I'm not going to make life hard for myself. I'm going to stick to integer and go I pre-score is equal to an integer. There we go. And I'll end off this constructor method with a semicolon. Very, very easy. Now, there's a shortcut key that we can use here to help us actually declare the method. Remember, everything under interface is a declaration. Everything under implementation is called an implementation. So let's implement the constructor method. To do this, we'll hold down Shift, Control, and press the C button on our keyboard. And you can see that it kind of jumps there to my constructor method that has now been declared. If this doesn't work for you, you can always type the word constructor, taudition, which is the name of that method that we said, dot create, and then exactly the same attributes as before. Now, let's start assigning our attributes. The whole purpose of a constructor is to assign certain values to my attributes. So, fname is going to get its value from sname. Be very careful not to swap fname and sname around. I often say to my students that F stands for first. So the F must always be the first one in the sentence. Let's do the next thing, the same thing with category. If category is set equal to S category. Perfect. And now prescore. If prescore is equal to I prescore. Not difficult at all. Now the only thing that remains to be done is those last two values. Now I'm going to quickly take us back to the question paper so that we can see what I mean by that. If we look at our question paper, we can clearly see here at the bottom, there is still an instruction to follow. Set the number of votes and the final score to 0. Now this is done in the exact same way that we would have done this if this was in a normal grade 10 question paper. The F number of votes and the F final score attribute must be set to 0. Okay, let's do that then. Back at our code, going to look at my two variables here at the top, F vote and F final score. So scrolling back down to my method, we'll say these are the default. Let me just click there. The default values. We'll say F score is equal to 0. Let me just check what mistakes. Oh, F vote. F vote. And then the last one there is going to be F final score. And that's also going to be set equal to 0. Great job. We are done with our constructor. It was as easy as that. See that I kind of went off the screen there. As easy as just setting those two values. Great. Let's read what the second part of our question says and see if we can continue. So, going back to the second part of my question, I can now go to the second question. So let's read it. It says, write code for assessor method called getName and getFinalScore. for the name and the final score attributes. Now, not much is given to us here, but it's actually easy for us to answer our three questions as well. Firstly, we have to ask ourselves what kind of methods are we going to look for here? And the answer is very clearly an accessor method. Now you may go, hey, what on earth is an accessor method? Well, accessor method comes from the word access, and it simply means to get access to the value that is hidden inside the attributes. So get name would be used to get the value that is inside the fname attribute. And get final score is a method that is going to be used to get the value inside the final score attribute. Therefore, accessor methods are always functions. So I can quickly answer it over there. Now, the next one is to look for certain parameters. It's not often that you find accessor methods with parameters, but let's have a look. Write code for the accessor methods called getName and getFinalScore for the name and final score attributes. It does not look in that sentence to be any indication that there's going to be any extra data needed. We simply need to return it. Now, our last question is always, what do I need to return? Well, I need to return this string, which is going to be fname, and I need to return this. I think this is an integer. Let me just check actually. If final score is an integer, that is correct. So let's go back to our question paper here. So I'm going to return an int, sorry about that, an int, which is going to be if final score. Brilliant. Let's go and declare them. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go here underneath my constructor method that I declared previously. And I'm going to declare these two methods. The first one is going to be function get name. It's going to take no parameters, so I don't need any values in brackets. And then it will return, we said, a string. And while we're busy declaring, we might as well declare the second one. So function again, this time called getScore. It's going to return the score, the final score, and therefore it's going to return an integer. Brilliant. Now shift control and tap on the the C button. And now I've got these two methods declared. Now, a function like this is the most simplest thing you'll ever come across, because in order to return it, you simply say the result of this function is going to be fname. Now, what basically happens is result over here is a special keyword, and whatever I store in result will be the answer given when this question or this function is asked or called. So when a person uses the getName function, like we're going to do later on, we are going to get whatever is in the fname attribute. Remember, we said attributes are private, so they can only be dished out to the user or the GUI whenever they work through an accessor method like this. And the same thing goes for the getScore method. So this time we're going to do result equals and if final score. And that's it. That is as simple as it gets. Let's check out our third question. Our third question over here is going to be another one. So it says here, write code for a mutator method called setVote and setScore to receive the number of votes and the final score respectively. Update the relevant attributes and with the received values. All right, let's follow our procedures. First, we're going to ask ourselves, what kind of methods? And here, they used another special word called a mutator method. Now, A mutator method is a method that is specifically used in order to change the values of an attribute. When it just changes the value of an attribute, or it usually is a function that starts with the word set, then it is usually a mutator. Now, mutators are always procedures. They don't ask questions, they just get the job done. So two procedures need to be called, one called set votes and the other one called set score. And now let's ask ourselves the second question. Are there going to be any parameters? So I have to go over to my green pen here. Are there going to be any parameters? Well, yes, there is. The first one, it says, it seems, receives the number of votes. And again, we're getting this cool little keyword here that helps us to identify these things as parameters. The second one is going to receive the final score, right? So we've got a parameter for set votes and a parameter for set score. And then what do these return? Well, they don't really return anything because they are not a function. So let's head over to our code side, and this time we'll create these two methods as well. All right, so going back up here to our declaration side, we're going to start by quickly declaring the procedures. You start by writing the word procedure. Then the first one was called set votes. Set votes did receive a parameter, which was the number of votes. So I'm just going to use the word here, inumVote. And this was a integer variable. And of course, procedures do not return anything, so I can simply close it like this. Now the next one, procedure again. This time called set score. It receives as an integer value I score. And because it is a procedure, it does not return anything. Our special keyword, Shift, Control, and C. Great stuff. So let's do this one. The first one, it says, these attributes, these parameters, must modify the value of my attribute. In other words, my attribute must get a new value. So, if final score must get a new value called I scored. Notice here that I'm not referring to any GUI component. I'm not going over to my GUI and trying to figure out what the final score was or making up some numbers or anything like that. I'm just working with my made-up parameter I scores. That's fine. Because it's a parameter, we can figure out what values to put in there later on. Let's see if we can do the same with the next one. So for the next one, set votes, we can simply go if vote is equal to inumVote. Perfect. We are all done with that question. It's easy, right? As soon as you get the hang of it, these things become very, very simple. All right. Now let's look at a question that was less simple, the auxiliary method. Now the auxiliary method is usually a method that does a lot of calculations, does a lot of calculating and processing and stuff like that, and eventually comes back with a result. But let's read this question carefully, and afterwards we'll go through our normal steps. Write code for a method called checkQualified to return a Boolean value that indicates whether a candidate qualifies to participate in the competition or not. A candidate qualifies to participate in the competition if any one of the following two requirements are met. For the category singing, the pre-score must be more than 15, and for all other categories, the pre-score must be more than 12. And the final score for the edition should be more than 80%. I see there's a little typo there. At least two of the judges voted for the candidate to participate with a final score of 75% or more for the audition. So quite a complicated little question here, but let's address it the same way we would address anything else. First of all, I need to now identify what type of method this is going to be. And remember before when I said that sometimes this is not going to be something that you can see very clearly, like in the previous two examples, but sometimes you are going to have to look at these things and use your noodle. You're going to have to use your brain and your logic to try and figure it out. So let's see. Write code for a method called checkQualify to return. Immediately when I see this word return, I know that question 3, is this going to return anything, is going to be true. And if it is going to return a value, then it must be a function. So very, very easily, I've determined now by deduction, by actually thinking about this a little bit, that this is going to be a function. Now, let's check what values it needs to receive. Are there going to be any parameters? Well, it says write code for a method called checkQualify to return a Boolean value that indicates whether a candidate qualifies to participate in the competition or not. And then it goes on to say what's needed to work this out is going to be the category, it's going to be the pre-score, it's going to be the final score, and it's going to be the number of judges who voted for this candidate. Now, it seems that all of that information can be gathered from my attributes. So there are no other things that I can see here that should be parameters. What type of value should it return then? Our third question. Well, in this case, it should very clearly return a Boolean variable. All right, that's pretty easy. But now this part down here is a little bit complicated. So it says a candidate will qualify. So in other words, this thing will return true to participate in the community if any one of the two requirements are met. So immediately I can say, okay, well, it's going to be this guy or it's going to be this guy. So I can look at the top one and I can look at the bottom one and say, hey, any one of these two can be something, right? So this is going to make my if statement a little bit less complicated. Now, what is the requirements for the first one? Well, we said the category, so if category, I'm just going to shorten it to cat there, has to be singing. And the pre-score must then be 15. So there's an and here. The pre-score, and I'm just going to use abbreviations. There we go. The pre-score must be at least 15. So it can be more, so we'll say 15 or more. All right. Now there's an and, so I can just place some brackets around that and say, okay, that's going to be the one thing, right? Now, besides that, it says for all the other categories, right? So I can kind of just put a bracket around this and I can say, or if it is not singing, so if the category is not singing, so it's one of the other categories, and the score here is more than 12, must be more than 12, and the final score must be more than 80%. So, and this one has another and then, and final score must be more than 80%. So, quite a lot of things going on there. Now let's see what the second condition is going to be like. The second condition says at least 2 of the judges voted for the candidate to participate. So my votes should be more than or equal to 2. With at least a final score of 75. So and a final score of more than or equal to 75. So this is going to be my second set of conditions. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a difficult one to pin down, but I'm going to try and make this as easy as possible. So let's go and into our code, and we're going to see if we can make this happen. So going into my code, first thing that I need to do is I need to go and declare this. Now we said that this is going to be a function. So I like to keep my functions together. I'll say function, and it's supposed to be called check qualify, and it's going to receive no parameters, but it will return a boolean. Shift Control and tap on that C, and there we go. Our thing is created. Now, what I'm going to do here is a little bit strange. I'm going to just create a variable here for myself, just like I would create a normal variable, and I'm going to just call this B result, and we're going to set B result to a Boolean variable. Now, let's say we are going to be a very pessimistic auditor, and we're going to say, hey, B result is false. So we start off by assuming that this child did not qualify. But now we need to check if they did qualify. So what I first know, I can do an if statement here, and it must be something, that first bullet for the condition, or it must be something else. Now let's look at the somethings inside the first condition. That in itself had a something and an or there, or another something. And this first something had a condition and a condition. Now, I know this looks very complicated, but I'm just trying to get my ducks in a row. So the first one here was if F category is equal to, and then we can just say singing. Oh, that's what a capital S, singing. Now, because this is going to determine more or less everything that I'm going to do, I'm going to do a little bit of an adjustment here to my code on the fly. And I'm going to say, hey, if the category is singing, then I want to do something. And if the category is not singing, I'll do something else. So why is it doing that now? Probably press the insert button. Let's see. Yes. All right, there we go. So now we said if the category is singing, then the final score must be, so we'll do another condition here. We'll say if final score must be more than or equal to 15. That was the one condition. And that was basically the only condition. And then we said, well, if that's the case, if it's singing and it's more than 15, then we want to make this B result true. Right. If it's not more than or equal to 15, it'll skip this part, even if it was singing. Now, if it's not singing, so in other words, for all the other cases, we said we want the if final score. So that's going to be if final score is more than or equal to 12. Oh, they just said actually more than 12. More than 12. And the final score for the addition should be more than 80%. Oh, the pre-score. So if pre-score. Sorry about that. I made a mistake. So the pre-score must be more than 12. And then they go, and if final score must be more than or equal to 80. And then if that's true, then we want B result to be made true, because then the candidate qualifies. So if the category is singing, then this one has to be pre-score as well. I'm making mistakes here. then the pre-score must be more than or equal to 15 in order for them to pass, or, which can be simulated here with my else statement, we can say, okay, that could be the case, or if the pre-score was more than 12 and their final score was more than 80%, then they also qualify. So that's where it gets into this part. Now they say this could be the one option over here, right? But there's another option. So I'm just going to add another if statement here and make it easy on myself. I'll say if the judges voted for a candidate, at least two judges. So if votes were more than or equal to 2, so at least 2 judges voted for this learner to participate, and if final score was more than or equal to 75%, then the result would also be true. All right, so that seems to have covered it. I'm saying, hey, if the category is singing, the pre-score must be 15 or more, then the candidate will qualify. Or, which is simulated here by my else, if the pre-score is above 12 and the final score is above 80, then they automatically qualify as well. And then in the final case, if none of these worked, if 2 judges voted for them and their final score is still above 75, then they get to go anyway. So that makes a lot of sense. We can now go and just do the last part, and the last part's the simplest part. We'll say the result of this function is going to be whatever B result is. So if B result could never be changed to true throughout this section, it's going to return false. But if it was changed to true here, it will return true. So check qualify will work perfectly fine. All right, we're almost done. Let's look at our last part of this side of the code. So here on our question paper, we've got the last method here, and it says write a two-string method to return all the attributes of the object in the following format. And then they gave us number, category, pre-score, number of votes, scores addition, and they gave us an example as well. Now, we'll do our same little steps that we always do. The first one is going to be determine what type of method it is. Well, they gave us this little helper word here again, and we should know that a two-string method is always a function. So always a function. The second one, am I going to require any additional information? No. Traditionally, a two-string method will never require any kind of condition or parameter. And then the last one here is going to be, am I going to need some sort of an output? Yes, my output is going to be a string, and it's going to look more or less like this example over here. Great. Let's head back to the code side and we'll get cracking on this one. So first step, we have to go and declare it. This is a function again. I like to keep my functions grouped. So function to string. It does not receive any parameters and it returns a string. Shift, Control, and C. And our two-string method is created. Now it's as easy as creating a result string that kind of tells me exactly that result. So I'll start by saying the result is going to be the word name with a colon. And then it's only got a space there, so I'm just going to make a space so that I stick to exactly what's in here, plus fname. Now to go to the next line in a simple string, we can use #10. Oh, not #120. Not #100. There we go. Oh, my word. There we go. #10. You can also use #13, but this one works just fine. So continue to the next line like this. And here I need to do the category. So if category and a colon and a space. And now I can return if category. Perfectly nice. And we'll go to the next line again. The next one is pre-score. Pre-score. trying to make certain that I type it exactly as it's supposed to be, plus, now prescore is an integer number, so I'll go int to string if prescore and end it off the same way. So far, so good. The number of votes plus int to string if votes plus #10 plus, and then score for of audition, which is basically going to be my final score. So score of audition plus, and this is going to be my final int to string if final score, and end it off with a semicolon. And it's literally as easy as that. That's all you have to do in order to make your toString method. Just remember here as a little side note that you always, always, always have to make sure that you make it exactly the same way as the example in the book. You will actually get some marks here for using the correct format. All right. And ladies and gentlemen, believe it or not, that was it for the class side. The next part of the question is going to be almost completely based on what happens in the GUI or the unit 4. All right, so let's go over to that part. So it says now here, the incomplete program has been supplied in the question 1 folder. The program contains code for an object class to be accessible. It says, do the following code is provided. A globally declared object called obj audition, which I'll talk about in just a moment, and code in the reset button that will restore the properties of the components to their original state. Write code and task to described into question 1.2.1 to question 1.2.3. All right, easy enough. Let's quickly, before we start there, have a look at what's going on in my actual unit class. So in my actual unit class, you'll see that it looks just like any other class that you've gotten used to over the years, except for this guy over here. Now, this is very important. This is a global variable that has been declared. In other words, you can use it in all 3 of your questions that has been declared, and it is of type tAudition. Now you'll be saying, hey, wait a minute. tAudition is the same as the class we just created, right? And that's true. We're now going to be making objects using this class. So let's go over to the first question and see what it's all about. So in question 1, it says, the user must do the following. Enter the name of the candidate into the EDT name edit box. Select the category of performance from the CMB categories combo box and enter the prescore out of 20 in the EDT prescore edit box. Write code to do the following. So this isn't us. This is what the user is going to do, right? This is what we need to do. Extract. I see my mouse sometimes disappears. Extract the name of the candidate, the category selected, and the prescore that was entered, and use the information to instantiate a audition object. Now, this word over here is usually the one that gets you guys because you go instantiate. What on earth does instantiate mean? And I'm going to show you today. This is one of the easiest questions that you'll ever do in IT. So let's hop over to the code and get to working. All right. The first thing they asked us to do is to actually go to my GUI component, of which you'll just be able to see a little bit. And we need to do some extractions here from the EDT name, CMB category, and EDT prescore components. So let's go and do that first, right? I'm going to just, you can do this all in one, but just for the sake of explanation, I'm going to do this into variables. So I'll have S name of the candidate. I'll have S category for the candidate, which are going to be string. And then I also know that I need to extract I prescore. Right, those are the GUI components that they gave me. So where in the past, in the class, we didn't have to care about where the data comes from, over here in the unit, we definitely do. So let's go and get that information. S name, it's easy. I get that from edtname.text. Perfect. Let's look at the next one, S category. S category, I now need to extract this from my combo box. So hopefully you guys know how combo boxes work. But if you want to just grab the selected text, you can go CMB category, which is the name of the combo box. It's not the name of the combo box. Let me just go and check quickly. Oh, it's categories. CMB categories dot text. As simple as that. That's how you can extract the name that was chosen in the combo box. And then lastly, we have to go and say I pre-score is going to be a string to int of edt pre-score.text. All right, pretty basic grade 10 stuff, guys. Now, the next part is we need to now go and instantiate this object. So I'll go up to where this little note is left here for me. It'll always be there. And what I'm going to do now, very sneakily, I'm going to go and copy that. And I'm going to come down here to my code again, and I'm going to simply paste it in here. There we go. Now, the object addition is going to give you an error immediately, and that's because it doesn't like this colon. So we'll just add an exclamation or equal sign there to say, hey, this object now is a T addition object, right? But it can't just refer to the entire class. We need to now first create the object, and we're going to use that. We're going to use the constructor in order to do that. So you go dot and create. Now, look at our little note that's on that you can't actually see now on the screen, I realize. But inside, when you do this, there's going to be a yellow note on the screen that says S name, S category, and I pre-score. Why is it saying that? Because when we created our constructor here in the class, we said, hey, whenever somebody wants to use the constructor, they're going to need to give us a name, a category, and a pre-score so we can get on to doing this business, right? So now let's do that. Let's give them S name, S category, and finally I pre-score. That's as easy as that. You've now gotten the information from the GUI, provided it to the constructor class, and the constructor will now go and create it. The final step in our question paper just said that we had to indicate that the object was created with a suitable message. So I'll just go and say show message. I'm not going to be too creative. The object has been created. Perfect. Let's move on to our second question. This one is all done. Question 2. Let me just get the question paper up for you guys again. Question 2 says the following. The user must do the following. For each of the judges, check the relevant checkbox to determine whether they voted for the particular candidate to participate in the competition. Enter the scores that the judges awarded for the competition using the relevant input boxes. Each score must be a value out of 10. If a checkbox was not checked, the related score must be 0. Write code to do the following. Obtain the votes cast by the judges from check vote 1, check vote 2, check vote 3 boxes. If a checkbox was checked, the number of votes must be incremented by 1. This means that the total number of votes can be 0, 1, 2, or 3, depending on the number of judges who voted for the candidate to participate. Use setVotes method to set the value of the relevant attribute of the object, right? And then it says extract each one of the judges' scores from the EDT score 1, EDT score 2, and EDT score 3 edit boxes respectively. Your code must ensure that a score of 0 is used when the score as a score if the relevant checkbox is not checked. A note, you do not have to validate the scores, so we don't have to make sure that they are more than or less than 10. Then it says calculate the final score as follows. A score awarded by Judge 1 must carry the weight of 50% of the final score. The score of Judges 2 and 3 must each contribute 25%. And then they gave us a little formula here at the bottom in order to work that out. Now it says the final score must be rounded up to the nearest integer value. Use the set score method to set the value of the relevant attribute of the object and display the final score in LBL final score label. Now I know this is a mouthful. Let's have a look at what this actually means. Back at my code side, I'll quickly go hop over to my GUI and I just want to show you guys this little part over here. So basically when nothing is checked, the vote attribute must be 0. If 1 is checked, it must be 1, then 2, and then 3. We have to add up these scores and then use the scores we added up here to actually then work out what the final score is going to be based on that formula that they gave us. And that's more or less it. Except that we have to also make sure that these guys are 0 whenever a box is not checked. I'm going to show you the simplest way to do this. Hopefully you'll follow along very easily. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create two variables here. The first one I'll call I vote. And the second one I'm going to call I score. And I'll just declare both of them as integers. All right, now let's see. I'll start off by saying, hey, when we start off, the vote is going to be 0. And when we start off, the score is also going to be 0. Now, the first thing I need to do is I now need to check whether those boxes have been ticked and do something based on that fact. So I'll say if, and the boxes were called, let me just check here on my paper quickly. There we go. So the boxes were called CHK vote 1 dot checked. So doing this, just simply going dot checked means if the box is checked, what do I want to do? Well, I want to increment I votes. So I want to say, hey, this guy got an extra vote from this guy because this box is ticked. And then I also want to go I score is equal to I score plus, and then whatever is in that edit box. So that's going to be a string to int of edt score1 dot text. Okay, great. So now I'm incrementing the score and I am also adding the value. Now, if this box wasn't checked, I wouldn't increment the score, and I would certainly also not add the number. So the score would be set to 0. I can, if I just wanted to go and make sure, add a little else clause here to just say, hey, if this is not the case, if this box isn't checked, then just go ahead and set the score of this thing equal to 0. Perfect. Now that was for the first checkbox, and I'm going to repeat this code. So I'm just going to go and copy this and paste it again, and I'm changing this to a 2. I votes is still incremented. I'm changing that to a 2, and I'm changing that to a 2. And then you guessed it, for the third round, I'm pasting it again. Let's fix the formatting there. Changing this one to a 3. This one to a 3, and then this one to a 3. All right, so that should have gotten me where I wanted to go, except that I have made a crucial mistake. I need to actually go and create 3 variables here: I score 1, I score 2, and I score 3, because I'm going to need to use them separately in the actual code. So I might as well set all 3 of them equal to 0. So I score 1 at the beginning, and 2 and 3. Let's quickly just fix that. Okay, so this is going to be for I score 1 must be added there. This one will be I score 2, and this one would be I score 3. Perfect. All right. And if it's not, then we can just keep it at 0. That'll do fine. All right, perfect. Now, the only thing that's left to do is to actually determine the final score. So I will just go and use the set votes method. So now they said, okay, You now know how many votes there are, right? So now use the votes method to actually call that. So to do that, you're going to call the object. So obj audition dot set votes. And now I need to pass the number of votes through there. So saying, hey, take this number of votes and say, this is the amount of people that voted for it. Now, after I've done that, I also need to now figure out what the final score is and use the set score one. Now, the final score is calculated. Let's create a variable here. The final score is calculated way down here with the following formula. So you'll go and you'll say, I final score is equal to, and then they said, oh, well, it's going to be I score 1 multiplied by 5.0. There we go. Plus I score 2 multiplied by 2.5 plus, where's the next one? I score 3 multiplied by 2.5. All right, and now this whole thing has to be rounded up. Now, there's an easy way to round up, right? The way to round up is simply to go round, to place this whole thing into round. But in order to round up, you add 0.5. 0.5 will always round up to the nearest integer. So you can just add that 0.5 to make sure it rounds up. So there we go. We've got our final score now. Let's maybe place these guys on their own little line. Oh no, not a beam. Place them on their own little line so that we can see what's going on there much clearer. There we go. And then we have that plus 0.5 to make sure we round up. Now, it says, okay, after you've done that, you have to go and use the set score method. So obj audition dot set score. There we go. I want to add I final score in there. Perfect. All right. We're all done except for displaying on the label. So the label should be LBL final score. It's dot caption. It's going to be, and now a lot of us are tempted to use this I final score here. But remember, in object-oriented programming, we always want to use the functions if they're available. So first, let's check. Obj audition dot. There's an option here called get score. So we're always going to use this option rather than using the variable that we've got, because that's what we're testing here. So get score is going to give me an integer anyway. So I'll go int to string over there and end it off with a semicolon. Right, brilliantly easy. I know there's a lot of code here, but this was simply getting some information and setting it to 0. Checking the boxes, adding the scores where relevant, making it 0 where it was not relevant. Over here, we just used the set votes feature. We worked out the score according to that formula. We used the set score method over here. And then we used the get score method in order to return the caption of the label. All right. Let's look at the last question. We're almost done. So for our last question, it simply says the following. It says, display the information of the object in the red result output area using the toString method. Determine whether or not the candidate qualifies to participate in the competition using the check qualify method. Display a suitable message containing the name of the candidate in the output area using the getName method. The method must indicate whether the candidate qualifies to participate in the competition or not. And then they gave us an idea here and it says Peter qualifies to take part in the competition. So they want us to do this in the rich edit over here. All right, so that's not very hard. Let's get into it. So back to our code here. We're going to first add that information to the rich edit. Now, the rich edit in this case is simply called red result. So we just scroll up a little bit. Red result dot lines dot add. And watch how simple it is to use a toString method. You're just going to go obj audition, that little object that we created. Kind of works like a middleman between our class and our object. And then we're going to simply go .toString, and that's going to return that nicely formatted string, right? Easy peasy. Now, the next part is we have to determine whether or not this candidate has passed or not, right? So I'll go if obj audition dot, and now we worked out this whole method called check qualify, right? To check if the candidate is qualified. And it returns true. So if true will be when the candidate qualifies, and it returns false otherwise. So if it is true that the candidate will qualify, then I can go red result dot lines dot add. And what do I want to add? Well, I want to do obj audition dot get name method plus, and we'll do something like has qualified to, let me get the exact sentence from the paper. They said qualifies to take part. I'm just going to go to the next line so it's easier to read. To take part in the competition. Okay. I think that's spelled correctly. I don't know. All right, there we go. And that's basically it. I don't know if they're supposed to say does not qualify. Oh, it does. So what I need to do is I need to just copy this rich edit because I'm really lazy to type it. And I'll say, hey, bro, if you don't qualify, you're definitely not going to go to this. So does not, I even used nice big letters there, does not qualify to take part in the competition. Alrighty, that's it. That's basically what we had to do. And now we are done. So the only thing remaining for us to do is to actually run this competition and see if this actually works. So let's give it a go. Hopefully we don't have any errors and you guys will be able to understand everything. Here's hoping. Okay, so let's run it. No errors so far. Great stuff. And it's running on the wrong screen. Let me just get it over there. Great stuff. Hopefully you can see. Let's choose my own information here. So I'm just going to enter my name. What category am I going to? Definitely aerobatics. My pre-score. Well, I believe my pre-score was, let's see, 30. My pre-score was 30, yes. And I will instantiate. The object has been created, so it seems to be working. Obviously, all three of the judges voted for me. I got a 9. I got an 8 because this guy had a bad day. And then this guy gave me an absolute 10 because he's a stunner judge. And then I did that. Oh, it's displaying my score there at the bottom of 90. That sounds correct. And let's check what happens when I press the result. It says Martin, categories aerobics, pre-score 13, number of votes 3, score of audition 90. Martin qualifies to take part in the competition. All right, let's check what happens if we change a bit of these informations and see if we get something less. So let's say my pre-score was 5 and I was participating in singing. All right, there we go. It's still being created. Let's only have one judge vote for me. I'll make the other ones here 0. We'll make this one. It gave me a score of 2. Thought my singing was bad. Now I've got a pre-score of 10. Let's do the result here. It says, Martin again, category singing, prescore 5, number of votes 1, score for the edition was 10. Martin does not qualify to take part in the competition. So it seems like our code is working brilliantly. Now, I hope that you found this video informative. I will share with you the source code as well as soon as I see that everybody has tried to do this on their own as well. I hope that you guys felt like you were learning something. If I was going too fast, I do encourage you to pause, go back, and make sure that you understand each part. Good luck for the exam and happy coding. Bye bye.